On a windswept field, an unarmed warrior stands calmly against a charging army of orcs. With blinding speed, the warrior unleashes a flurry of punches and kicks as his foes fall in defeat around him. With the battle won, the warrior meditates on his actions before walking off into the sunset. The body is a temple and a weapon all in one. That's right, we're talking about monks tonight on Playing God. And not just D&D monks either, but carrying the concept over to other games and systems. One of the most stylish combatants, their mobility and amount of attacks is equaled by no other class. I'm Nick Logie, and with me as always is Xander Nolan.
Hey, man.
We both have experience with playing monks, especially Xander. How do you feel about the class as a whole since you've been playing it for like 2 years?
Well, I feel a sort of kind of kinship to the monk class, but the kinship is actually rather new. My very first monk was actually in the Legends of Latir game that you run, so I had no experience with him before. It seemed kind of fun. I was like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna give it a try.
Have you not played monks in any game, or was it just 5th Ed?
I hadn't played monks in any game, in fact.
Huh.
Same thing with like a warlock. I'd never played a warlock before either. I typically stuck to like fighter, barbarian, occasionally a rogue, stuff like that. But my primaries were combatants, but I always kind of shied away from monks because it seemed like they were too complex and too complicated. Um, I did a little bit of research regarding monks, and some of the biggest changes are with the movement and like the pluses to damage and to hit and all that stuff. Like it's changed a lot since even 3.5 into 5th Ed. So
I've never done any. I didn't do as much 4th Ed gaming, so I don't really know how to compare it to that.
I did. I did exactly 0 4th Ed gaming. So
But what kind
I,
of
I
changed with the movement? Because the monk's been pretty consistently like the fast guy. So
Yeah. Well, in 5th edition, if you follow Monk all the way down to 20th level, they have plus 30 feet to their movement speed, which coupled into a kind of grid-based combat system is insane. Like that's double what most creatures are capable of moving. So stupid fast.
oh yeah,
But
I
in
used
like
to try making my maps big enough so that way I could actually make you use more than one movement to get across the entire thing. But that quickly just became infeasible. So I was just like, fuck it, it's whatever size he can just move anywhere he wants on the map.
Yeah. Uh, uh, it actually started out. I don't know about previous editions to 3.5, but in 3.5, their movement speed went up to 90.
90?
It was yeah, it was 90 feet per round. Now this was static. It's like you had a base uh, uh, unarmored speed of 30 feet starting out the gate, and then it slowly went up, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and then all the way up to 90. Pathfinder is actually the exact same way, but instead of saying you have this much movement speed, they use the race's base movement speed, and the class is an addition to. So at second level or third level in Pathfinder, you get plus 10 feet to it to
Uh-huh.
your movement speed, all the way down to plus 60, which is the same.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that's right. And like,
yeah,
isn't in 3.5 in Pathfinder like you had to like take certain feats because you couldn't like move, attack like you
yeah.
can in
It
5th
was
Ed where you can just break it up however you want.
yeah, it was mobility and spring attack were the two that were really
That's
really
right.
big.
But you had to like blow your feats getting those because
Oh
they had
yeah.
like prereqs and all sorts of shit.
Yeah. Now the crazy thing for monks from uh, 3.5 and Pathfinder is that's differing from 5th Ed is I like how they simplified things in 5th Ed to use the proficiency bonus across the board. It's made things a lot more simple.
One of the
But
things I do remember,
yeah.
if I because I never played a monk in like Pathfinder, but I have more experience with that in 3.5, is I think monk was one of those classes, kind of like paladin back in the day, where you kind of
Mhm.
wanted to have good everything in your attributes. So if you
Oh
didn't
yeah,
like roll well or something like that right into character creation, a lot of people just avoided the monk.
yeah. Now, the thing with fifth edition for a monk specifically is you have your regular attack, and then at fifth level you get extra attack, and you're always going to be able to do martial arts. You can always use key points and stuff like that, and then you could do flurry of blows, which you get when you get the ability to use key. Um, and that use of key was it, it does use just an extra two attacks instead of one bonus for the use of a key point, but that's even all the way up to 20th level. The difference is for for 3.5 and Pathfinder. 3.5 you had a kind of dropping scale to your base attack bonus, and your first unarmed damage attack bonus was at a plus 15, which is insane. Like you're probably gonna hit it, even if it's like if you roll a one, you still
You miss because it's a one, but if you roll a
yeah
two, then
yeah you're still
probably get
hitting
it.
most stuff. But then it goes down to a 12, then to a 9, then to a 6, then to a 3, and the unarmed damage per one of those attacks was a d20, and then you had a plus 4 AC bonus rather than using the combination of your wisdom and
Right, because in fifth
uh,
ed you
yeah
use wisdom and dexterity only if you're not wearing any armor or carrying a shield or whatever.
yeah
But in other ones you just got like a static bonus,
yeah
right?
uh, and the same thing is true for Pathfinder. It's just you have more attacks and it's 2d10s rather than a d20. The difference in fifth edition though is that it's just a d10. That's
Yeah.
one.
Well, yeah, I
But
noticed that in the whole column, you never get more than one die when you
yeah
roll your damage. Where in older editions you get it was like a D4 and then like two D4 and then it's like two somethings or
yeah
two
you,
Ds.
you get the D10 at eighth level for a monk in Pathfinder, and you get the D10 at I think it's the same for 3.5 as well. But in fifth edition, you don't get your D10 until you hit 17th level. Um, so yeah, I think that the biggest issue where monks were concerned is if you had good stats and they were min maxed, a monk could be devastating to a battlefield and to as a combatant. Super super broken. Like same thing with warlocks in Pathfinder in 3.5. That you could really go kind of nuts with them.
Well, yeah, after a while, like anything with spell casting just went out of control.
Yo, absolutely, absolutely. I think that the thing that 3.5 did right was it simplified things down. It took a lot of the guesswork out of trying to make the character, because I think personally, now this I can't speak for the creators or anything. This isn't me saying, oh no, this is what they think.
That was
It's
a direct quote. We're putting this all in quotes.
it's all quote.
Gygax 2012.
You can quote me if you like, though. I think that the crowning jewel of fifth edition is the fact that it took things away from a role playing game in two L's, not the LE. It was all a dice game in 3.5 and Pathfinder, and unfortunately, a lot of the guys coming up in like the late 90s, early 2000s that just started to get into gaming, they're introduced to Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, and that's their introduction. And when the game is basically a numbers crunch, and how do you finagle the feats and abilities to get the best stuff that you can possibly get, and stupid amounts of like magical weapons and things like that, I feel like it detracted away from the very the very real possibility for good role play as a character rather than just a sheet of paper with a bunch of numbers on it. But that's how I feel. I think they took all that
I've
complex
seen some
stuff.
good monk play in Pathfinder. Some the guy took the vow of like poverty, I think, and so like he wouldn't take any magic items or any pretty much anything.
Yeah.
And that would led to some cool role play where it's just like we have this awesome thing that we found, and it's just like you should use it, and he's like, no, this incredibly powerful thing. I'll pass on that.
Well, I think that I'm not saying across the board. It's definitely on a case by case basis. There are some great role players from the Pathfinder days, 3.5. I know that was the Dungeons and Dragons that I was introduced to when I first started playing was 3.5. But
Yeah, see, I thought,
I
I mean,
yeah
I think the role play in those like the role play, in
yeah
Pathfinder, because I really didn't do 3.5 at all. But Pathfinder's close enough. Uh, I don't think it was so much of like a numbers game in a lot of ways. Like you could, it depends on your group, but a lot of times it
yeah
was like anybody I ever played with, like they got really into their character. They basically used the rules like that their class and their race put forth, and just kind of rolled with that a lot more.
mhm,
Uh, but I didn't really have much of a problem with people really focusing hardcore on like the numbers. Now, the older versions did have the the progression system where they you do need to factor in like magic items and shit like that in order to like to calculate CR and other bullshit. But
yeah
and in fifth ed, they pretty much just relegated magic items to a special thing that you can find rather than you need this to quote unquote win.
yeah. I guess it's just the groups, and because my experience, there was a lot of min max and playing to win kind of players that I was introduced to early on. I think that's part of the reason I slip into it sometimes. Yes, yes, people listening, I do indeed slip into power gaming sometimes. It is a sin of gaming, but
Well, there's
it's
appropriate
something
times
that's
for
yeah
that. So like if you say that you want to run like a super dungeon, like 100 levels worth of this dungeon, and it's supposed or like what's the like the tournament thing that they do at conventions a lot. It's basically a dungeon that your goal is to actually win, and the GM's goal is to actually kill you. So
oh
in that
goodness, I
case,
haven't played any of those, so I don't know.
I can't remember what it's called, but there's like a term for it.
Hmm.
And like that in like if you're power gaming in that sense, like if that's what or if you want to like a more Diablo style like kill the thing, get the loot, then I think that's perfectly acceptable. It's just with
Yeah,
the way we play the game, it's a lot more about the character progression, the character like role play progression and like
yeah,
development rather than all the numbers. The numbers just kind of are there so that way we can all kind of sync up our imaginations and have like constructed make believe.
yeah. Well, uh, just to give everybody a kind of a broad stroke out there, we're not saying that to build your class and build your character crappily. We're just saying that like if your purpose in the game, if for let's say for a medium magic campaign that's going to be lasting for a couple of years, like Legends of Latier, min maxing your character probably not the greatest of things to do.
Well, I mean,
Your
okay,
your
so
your focus should
let's
be
use
elsewhere.
Kenton as an example because
Oh yeah,
he is a monk that you've been playing for 2 years now.
yes,
When you're actually constructing a character, if you're trying to do it efficiently for a monk, then you want high dexterity, high wisdom. That's
oh
pretty
yeah,
much going to be everything you do because dexterity adds damage and everything, so you don't have to worry about like having a high strength score or anything. But what you did you put like your biggest modifier into charisma?
I did indeed. My character's backstory was that he was born to a very very poor family. His mother and father were shoemakers. They were cobblers,
Yeah,
and
you actually have the had told the backstory in a previous episode.
yes,
Um,
yes, I have.
but basically, we could skip to the part where it's like you were raised to be
Yeah,
a
politician.
diplomat because you were adopted by the nobility,
Hmm.
and you're supposed to be able to talk to people, be able to make agreements and stuff like that. So it made
Yeah.
sense for your character to have a high charisma score because you're
Yep.
using persuasion and all that pretty
Hmm.
frequently.
Yeah. The way the character was built initially was that he was first the son of a politician, adopted, but still. And he was second a monk of the Way of the Open Hand. And I played that in terms because he would have the first things that he would learn would be a little bit of intellectual gain, but a lot of exposure to politics and policies and
And even the monk
the ability
training
to
itself
speak.
wasn't like out of left field. It was like teaching discipline,
Mm.
self-sufficiency.
Oh yeah.
It was like meditating and to try to like make sure that when you go into like a social debate or a big meeting with like important people, then
Hmm.
you would be able to go in calm, collected, and able to really affect the change that you want without getting hot-headed. And I mean,
Oh,
that's pretty much
absolutely.
your training. So
Yeah,
you could totally
absolutely.
play a monk like that. But even if you hadn't put all of your like your highest modifier into charisma, then
Literally pushed the dump stat for monks.
you could have still gotten away with that. You would have just been a little more powerful when it comes to like the fighting aspect of it.
Yeah. See, with Kenton specifically, he was born a politician. He can talk his way out of damn near anything, but his physical abilities were what was lacking. Yes, he's a monk. He's classically trained. He knows how to channel his ki and everything, but he's kind of the wimpy kid in class. He was
For a
the
while.
Yeah, for a while, and his adventures are what made him a powerful monk, and the association with uh, Nemaskar that gave him the kind of special abilities that he has. Those are the things that made him a force to be reckoned with physically. His strength still a 10. Like he's averagely strong. He's just dexterous.
Right.
So his first capabilities were all of were all of the tongue, and I wanted him to build and grow physically and not come out of the gate like able to smush everything that's in his way.
But monk's also a
Because
good class
yeah,
for that because even though you have average strength, you can use your key points to like say you need to jump really high and well you're you can run on walls and water and bullshit like that already. But let's say you didn't have that and we're back a few levels, you could use that to like double your jump distance and like basically mitigate the problems of having either a +0 or a minus something.
yeah, no, that's true. Uh, you could still the great thing about fifth edition is even if you push your dump stat, you're still capable. You're still able to do the thing that your class is designed to do. It's not going to hinder you at all. Uh, where I think that's where 3.5 and Pathfinder they don't quite make up for as well. Because if you have a shitty dexterity
Well,
as a
you
monk
you
in
needed like
Pathfinder,
everything
done.
because I don't think that it factored in your dex into your actual damage. It did for the attack, so you could like get a +4 or whatever from your dexterity if you have
Yeah,
an 18. But then like once you hit somebody, you're rolling like a d6, and if you don't have any strength, then you're just getting a d6.
yeah, no, absolutely. So I think that's one of the things that fifth edition did a little bit. Also, one of the things that fifth edition did that previous editions didn't. I think they tried at some point, but it didn't quite work out all that well. And that's the thing that sets fifth ed apart is the pathways. When you reach either second or third level with almost every single, I actually
It's
think it
third.
is
It's
every
third.
single.
It's third level for every class. You get
Yeah.
like the special like path that you can pick.
Ah. Okay. What it does is a monk in 3.5 and Pathfinder is a guy sitting cross-legged in a gi on a mountaintop with his hands folded in his lap of peaceful mind, and that's it.
It's generally
He
pretty
is,
stereotypical.
yeah, he's the guy that punches stuff. That's what he do. But the fifth edition, they have the punchy guy. That's Way of the Open Hand. But they also have have one that's a spellcaster that casts
Yeah,
elemental
in
spells,
in fifth ed, the
called Way of the Four Elements.
there are three monastic traditions, which is basically what your monastery or um, your origin of being a monk kind of trained you to do
Mhm.
in both a philosophical way and a combat way, because it's
Oh yeah,
D&D, so it's combat. Um, the way of the open hand. That's the one you got going on in Legends of
yeah,
Latir, which is it's probably the simplest one, but it is not lacking in like usability and options.
oh yeah, yeah. The way of the open hand works, it's uh, all about maneuvering your opponent to get best advantage, like pushing them 15 feet to maybe knock them into a gulch, or into a wall to kind of block and trap them, or prevent them from taking reactions because you're just that quick. Whereas Way of the Shadow, your uh, your tradition is more subterfuge and stealth. That's where the cloak and dagger kind of rogue part to the monk comes in. Because let's face it, everybody wants to play a sneaky character, but the problem with sneaky characters in a lot of editions for both Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinders, and abroad is that you're limited to the dagger or the short sword. You can't use a long sword, you can't use a great sword, and you can't even use your own fists. So I think that kind of the way they do that is really really interesting. And then there's on top of that the Disciple of the Elements, where you can cast Fireball. I think one of the best lines from a popular video game out there. If you know it, you can tell me, but I can't say it on the air. Nobody ever expects a flying fireball out of nowhere, and you're in this kind of uh, brotherhood of assassins and
What?
subterfuge artists. And there's a spellcaster there who regales you with the whole, you can't. Nobody expects a fireball out of nowhere,
Wait, well, hold
and he's
on.
an assassin.
So first, what the fuck are you talking about, and why can't we say it?
Skyrim, dude, Skyrim.
Oh, Skyrim.
Yeah,
Why can't we talk about Skyrim?
I don't know. Like,
We gonna get sued by Bethesda?
no, probably not. Just licensing
I already hear
things.
them knocking at my door. Oh shit, they're
Oh
here.
God, no, they're
They heard us.
yeah. I mean, we see Pathfinder 3.5, Dungeons and Dragons. I guess that's fine. Yeah, but one of the guys that you deal with he casts fireballs to assassinate people, and that's fantastic. That's incredible.
That's neat.
And the way this Disciple of the Elements, that gives you the ability to do that, and I think that's one of the things that Fifth Ed gets right. Is it's not just the punchy guy. It's not just the dude that's going to go up and wreck your shit.
Well, it
Up
also
close and
means that
personal.
if, for some reason, if three people in the party decide to be monks, they could all be wildly different.
Oh, way, way different. Like in more than just in a role play sense, in a actual mechanics and physical sense too.
Yeah.
So, so yeah. And my experience with the level progression, like now I have my nitpicks. There's some things about the way Monk progresses through the levels that early on makes them slightly less effective, uh, and later on uh, makes them slightly less effective, but they really shine right around the middle. So from like first level on to fourth or fifth, you're okay. You're not bad, but you're not all that great either. You're once you get that D6 for your damage is when you really start to get traction. But then by the time you hit about 14th or 15th level, the other classes are starting to leave you in the dust with their capabilities and their abilities. Now, the way they're balanced for Way of the Open Hand and the Way of the Shadow and all of the other monastic traditions out there, because I think there's more in like Xanathar's or uh,
The Sword
yeah,
Coast Adventuring Guide.
yeah, that one. There's more out
Skag.
there. Skag. But there, the way level progression works, it's a lot more balanced than it had been. In
Well, to be fair,
3.5 Pathfinder,
anything where the spellcasters don't go completely nutso after sixth level is is much more balanced.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think they took a lot more time to really analyze what was important about the game itself and kind of get back to the roots.
Oh, I mean,
But
they went with fifth ed, like, just make everything OP, and then that's how we're gonna balance it.
yeah, everything is great. Nothing's gonna suck. Um, when we talk about Ranger in a future episode, I have some nitpicks about that one too. That they've
I've
actually had to
seen a little bit
fix.
of Ranger, but I haven't really played it much. Now, I, you did have a good point with how the progression is kind of not great at times, but I think it's because like Monk is a very mobile, very you make many attacks per turn kind of class,
Yeah,
which kind of makes sense as to why the damage dice don't really progress super heavy like they did in the past.
yeah,
Because you eventually get your hands become magic, so you can bypass all that like damage reduction.
oh
And
yeah,
if you're I mean, if you're like and you're not like supposed to be a heavy hitter, you're supposed to be consistent damage. Whereas a barbarian is like really bursty. Like make a couple attacks, you can hit for like incredible amounts of damage or pittance. But
yeah,
they're generally, I mean, they have a bit of the mobility, but they're not crossing the entire map like
yeah,
3 times in one
yeah.
turn.
Where monks shine is in their ability to move around. Now, to be fair to people out there playing monks in your fifth ed games and other game systems too, uh, the thing about Kenton that's different is he has a kind of special thing that he got from befriending literally a dragon that gives him the ability to cast haste on himself
Effectively, it's not this. It's not a haste.
effectively.
It's not haste as written in the book. It's toned down a bit.
It's haste divided by two, kind of. It burns out faster. It takes a lot of key points to get to, but that that boost to the speed is really nuts for Kenton.
But
But
even before you got that, you were like going a million miles in
oh yeah,
each of the grids.
yeah. Now like that was at second level you get your first plus 10, and that's 40 feet around. Now that may only be two extra squares, but that's two extra squares from your allies that are behind you. And so if you got to get up close and personal real fast, monks are the way to do it. They really are. They're the
And
guys that get up there and lock them into place before the barbarian comes in and smotes them.
monks are actually kind of tanky too.
Yeah, a little bit.
They're kind of like speed tanks. They have a if you do it right, you got a high AC, so things aren't hitting you very much.
Mhm.
You can literally use a fucking key point to take dodge as a bonus action, which is
Oh
absurd.
yeah. Oh,
Just gives
that's so
everything
good.
disadvantage against you. And not only that, I mean they got a D8 per level. That's not like amazing, but
Yeah.
in addition to that, they have those self-healing abilities like you recover what is it, wholeness of body or something like that, where
Yeah, it
you
is
recover
wholeness
three
body.
times your monk level, and
Yeah.
you have to long rest after that. But like that's a lot of HP that you could just give yourself, especially in a pinch. You can almost
Yeah.
like reset the damage in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Now, the wholeness of body, you get at sixth level, but that's way of the open hand monastic tradition thing that you get. It's not all monks don't get that, but that is really really useful
Well,
because
that
in a
makes sense for Way
pinch,
of the Open Hand because you are supposed to be up in their face with the other,
yeah,
like with Way of the Shadow, I think it is.
yeah, way of the shadow.
Way of the Shadow, you're like that's more like a manipulation thing, and Way of the Four Elements, you could just basically cast spells at range. So those
Oh yeah,
don't always guarantee that you're going to be up in the grill of whatever you happen to be fighting. But the way you play, you are always up there as soon as you possibly can.
yeah, yeah. The thing with monks, as far as a level progression, is now my experience has been with Way of the Open Hand and then the little bit of Wuji stuff on the side. But from an analytical point of view, the way the way it kind of balances itself out is I have a player character who plays a uh, Way of the Four Elements monk. And she casts and she does the spells thing. Now she does get up in there with her bow staff and kicks the crap out of these guys and spends key points to do that. But she was very, very like heavily front loaded, and kind of petered off slightly towards the end because they're at 11th level now. But the Way of the Shadow, however, it doesn't pick up its steam until about 10th or 11th level. So it does kind of balance things out. There's one that gets really good stuff at the beginning, one that gets good stuff at the end, and so on. But I think that it's well balanced in comparison to some of the previous editions, for level progression specifically, and the way that they use these monastic traditions and the other pathways for the other classes is what really makes it kind of stand out, in my opinion. So not an analysis of Fifth Ed, just to kind of compare and contrast, Pathfinder and da da da.
Yeah, well, the big thing about monks that really sets it aside from other classes, other than the basically the monastic traditions, that is like now I'm a monk fighter, now I'm a monk rogue, or now I'm a monk wizard, then
Yeah.
is you, and this is more the role playing description part of it, where you want to live up, you want to embrace the wuxia, you want to describe your fucking attacks because you're gonna make a lot of them, and they got to be stylish. And
Oh, anime as fuck.
I know you, Xander, love doing that, and so do I. When I was playing the the monk sorcerer in your game for a while, then
Yeah.
that was fucking awesome. Being able like describing each individual blow, and then like for that character specifically, using meta magic from sorcerer to combo in like melee spells and other shit to
Oh yeah,
really bring
that's
out the
really
damage.
well done. Yeah.
I spent a long time trying to figure out how to do that within the rules, because trying to get that all line up so you could use spells and punching in the same turn is hard.
Yeah, it doesn't conduce very well. But uh, we've put a lot of time in talking about the monk as a class. What do you think about how they use ki, like the concept for it, where it comes from, and how it's kind of utilized throughout the systems? I know that 3.5 and 5th Ed, I don't know if they use ki or not. I haven't looked into that yet. Actually, I will take a look.
Wait, I think you just said. Did you say fifth ed just a second ago? Because I think you did.
Or 3.5, my bad.
I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
ki has been around since the monk has been. And well, so with ki, if you go by the way the book describes it, which it's a pretty classic interpretation, it's like the magical energy pretty much generated by living beings, that it isn't just inherent in all living creatures. Whereas like arcane magic, wizards and sorcerers are like using their abilities to pull from the weave or another source of power, maybe like warlocks take it from a patron. Then monks, it's like it's just part of them, and they learn to utilize that in their self healing, in their combat, in pretty much anything. And the way I like to do it, because I run everything like an anime,
Hmm.
is I like to think of ki kind of like how Dragon Ball uses ki. It's because like if and since I'm talking about embracing the wuxia, like if I'm if I'm playing a Way of the Four Elements monk, which is what I was eventually going to get into if I ever got to third level
Yeah.
in monk, then I was gonna make up move names or just use the ones in the book, because you gotta be like I drop into a stance with an open palm fist. I declare loudly to my enemy right before I hit him in the face, like Fangs of the Fire Snake, which is one of the spell ones in here. It's like you fucking jab him in the throat with fire or some shit like that. I actually didn't read what you can do, but like you can just name your moves, man. It's like rising crane, drop kicks, frog. There you go. That's some bullshit you can just make up. Came up with that
Yeah.
just out of
Yeah.
nowhere.
Yeah. Like it's if you want to play the character that's just super off the chain, and really get descriptive and everything with your fighting and your ability to move around, the monk's the way to go.
And if it
Absolutely.
was ever appropriate, like for the way of the four elements, like if there's since you still have to go by the actual like spellcasting thing, um,
Mhm.
the one of the things I would have probably done is like do the Dragon Ball Z ha while I'm charging up, charging up your key, and then you blast them with some fucking fireball or something like that.
That's cool. That's awesome. That's very Dragon Ball Z.
But I
I love it.
with Legends of Latier, key is I kind of went with how it is in the book. It's more of a just an intrinsic magical or quasi magical phenomenon that just occurs in living beings. Uh,
Mhm.
it I found it worked pretty well. Like it worked really well with the mechanics just in general, because like way of the open palm, you hit people and you actually affect their key directly, which is how you can like knock them prone and blow them back and
Yeah.
shit like that. So
It's the same thing with Tongue of the Sun and Moon, which Kenton just recently got. He can touch the key, use his key to touch other minds so that they can understand what he says.
and that
And
works really well for you being a politician.
hell yeah, it does. I speak air language, and everybody understands me, and I can understand everybody.
I like how
So
confused the
yeah.
party was when you started doing that. Like, how do you speak everything?
The crazy thing, it's like they can understand him because he's just speaking in common, for the benefit of the party. He's got three other languages he can choose, but uh, in the first thing that he talks to is like a rock eating monster in the Underdark, and it's like, hold on, don't attack it. I'll go talk to it. It's like, it's a rock monster. You can't talk to a rock monster. And
It
he
don't,
walks up,
yeah, it only
starts
spoke
talking to it.
Terran, so
Yeah.
you're just like, I'm gonna talk to it in common. What? And then you just start saying it's like, oh yeah, that's right. It could just understand you, and even though it's basically just sounds like it's graveling or like crunching rocks at you or whatever Terran's supposed to sound like, then you're just like, oh yeah, I get that, I understand.
Yeah, no, I understand. And like everybody was like,
The
"What? What
fuck?
is happening? I don't understand what's going on." Yeah, it could not have come at a better time though, because our player characters, which are surface dwellers, just went to the Underdark. So you can imagine how painful that would have been if we couldn't speak, if no one could speak Undercommon.
Oh yeah,
That would
that
have
would have been
been
bad.
that would have been bad. No, that would have been very very bad.
So what I'd say is if you're playing a monk, then you best be ready to have some stylish ass descriptions. Otherwise, you probably just won't have as much fun. Because otherwise, it's a lot of I roll a d20 and then hit something or miss, and then that's not really all that great. Oh, one thing. I think in previous editions, you're gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but with fifth ed that pretty much just eliminated any alignment requirements for
Mm,
everyone. I think. Um,
yeah, I
then
think
in
so.
previous ones, I think you had to be lawful something.
Yes. As a matter of fact, both 3.5 and Pathfinder required any lawful, so lawful good,
You
lawful
could do
neutral, or
good,
lawful evil.
neutral, or evil. So yeah, okay.
Yeah,
As long as you followed some kind of code.
yeah. And to be fair, that makes a lot of sense considering
Yeah,
what monks
it's a
are.
discipline more so in those games.
Yeah. But they have a lot less flexibility than fifth edition does, and I think that's important. Now, playing a monk that is chaotic, I feel could be a ton of fun. That could be so. It's like you run up, punch the crap out of somebody, run away. It's like, I gotcha. And just kind of like a complete source of like nonsense, and you never know what they're gonna do. Because a monk isn't necessarily, for fifth edition, a guy in a temple that studied in a temple. A monk for fifth edition can be all the way like he's just a street fighter that happened to come across some books, read up on them, and figure this stuff out as he
Or
goes.
even not even that. Like he could just like during a fight, then at some point he realized that he was just like, I feel like this energy coursing through my veins, and like he
Yeah.
might think that that's just a normal thing that people feel, but then he starts winning more and more fights, and he's like, this doesn't seem right.
Yeah, no, it's totally open ended, and I think that that's important to really analyze from a player standpoint. If you're gonna play a monk, don't feel like you have to be stuck in that kind of classic monk philosophy, like you have to be from a monastery and you have to be, have to take the vow of chastity and the
The
uh,
vow of whatever,
uh, vow of whatever.
the
Those
vow
things
of
aren't
not
really
having fun.
necessary. Yeah, like I believe it was GM Tips with Matthew Mercer. He said something rather similar. For example, a barbarian doesn't always have to be the dude in a loincloth that carries a giant sword, even though Karks is,
Yeah,
but
Andrew
he's our
definitely
moral center.
plays that exact thing.
Oh yeah. Now he's our moral center, which is strange for the barbarian to be, but that's what he is. But it could just be like a coal miner that whose kids were killed and he just got some serious anger issues, and that's a barbarian. That's what they are. And he carries a giant hammer, and that's what he does. So don't feel like you're stuck with the classic view of a monk. You don't have to be Shaolin.
I
Uh,
mean, you could
you know,
even like take
yeah,
the acrobatic and mechanical proficiency that you get from monks, and if you're like a chaotic character, chaotic whatever, then you could just use that during roleplay. It's just like, yeah, we're talking at the bar, and then for some reason, like I get bored, and then I pick up the chair and start kicking it back and forth like a soccer ball on my feet, and then I get bored of that after like 5 minutes, so I just punt it across the room.
you
And then
hit
next thing you know, you start a bar fight.
start a bar fight. This is a lot more fun. Yeah, no, monks are so much fun to play, and there's so much more to each of the classes. I'm sure we'll cover all of the
Well,
classes
we're gonna get
eventually.
around to it.
Yeah, but monks are they're very versatile. They're very utilitarian. You can be a lot of things as a monk. It's more than just a fighting style or a character class. There's a lot of opportunity for really great role play as a monk, depending on which way you want to go with it. And a lot of the abilities are really interesting to add to role play and to flavor. Like a really good example would be you get the ability to deflect missiles at third level. That is stupidly good. Like someone shoots an arrow at you, and you, Princess Mononoke, grab that arrow and huck it back at them.
So another stipulation, if we're gonna go this route, um, is it says missile, so that doesn't necessarily mean arrow or crossbow bolt. If you're
That could be ballista.
it could be fucking guns.
Wait, I never thought of that.
If somebody
Oh,
shoots you with a musket or a revolver or something like that, you can just grab that out of the air and throw it back at them.
Nick, Nick, I can't even. Oh no.
Guns, my
You can
man.
you can literally bulletproof monk that shit. That's awesome.
It's a
I
ranged attack, ranged weapon attack that has a missile. So
That's
you can do that.
incredible. Kenton can literally catch bullets. That's great. That's so great. I can't. Oh, that's something to remember. Something to remember.
Now
I think that
that's
would
some out of control
Kelch the hell
stupidity.
out.
That would be amazing. I need to shoot
That
you with a gun at some point just so you can do that.
that Keljan, right? That's who made that, right?
Well, Keljan was one of the like three inventors who worked for like many years trying to develop gunpowder and shit like that.
Yeah. Like if Keljan's hanging around and Kitten gets shot with a bullet, he grabs a bullet and hucks it back and kills a dude. I think Keljan's probably gonna have a litter of
Oh,
kittens.
he's gonna have a great time with that.
Like How the fuck did you do that?
Yeah, and
That's
speaking
great.
of guns, like this isn't like a this kind of transitions into Shadowrun a bit, but
Oh yeah.
because you have like the monk equivalent in other games, so you can apply the same kind of like philosophical stuff or just stylish actions to other games. I'm going to use Shadowrun because it's something I'm familiar with, and a character. You play? Did you play an adept, or did you just play an
I
ogged up street samurai?
I played an ogged up street samurai who became a fizz
Right,
adept
that's
by
right.
a way of drinking.
You drank radioactive beer every possible chance you could.
Yep.
It was free, so whatever. But
Hey,
yeah, in
classic.
Shadowrun, there are these like an archetype called an adept, because Shadowrun doesn't necessarily have classes, but it has like archetypes. Adepts use basically intrinsic magical powers gifted by existing pretty much, to do kind of the same things monks can do. They can run on walls. They can like give themselves like a boost in strength. It's a lot of self modification using magic rather than spell slinging. You're basically casting buffs on yourself is the simplified version.
Playing a fizz adept in Shadowrun was a lot of fun too. Uh, eh,
Physical
I
adept
think
for those who didn't get what
yeah.
fizz meant.
Sorry, physical adept. If you don't know what the Shadowrun Fifth Edition kind of lore and stuff is for how that works out, but totally go get the books, read them up. They're a really good read.
Shadowrun's one of my
Uh,
favorite systems. We mostly talk about D&D because it's the big popular thing, and almost everybody knows about it. So
yeah,
that's kind of why we're sticking with it. But Shadowrun, definitely. If you want some good cyberpunk, like Ocean's 11, uh, even like Akira, whatever, cyberpunk, the capital C cyberpunk, then that's where you want to go. It's got technology, it's got augmentations, it's got magic. Fucking dragons. Live with it.
it's a lot of fun. I think it was Jesse. You guys remember Jesse from our earlier episodes? He actually said in play as his character Doublejack, uh, because my character was like he's looking down at his hands because he'd broken someone's neck, just punched him and broke their neck and killed them. And he's like, looks down at his hands. Maybe I should put on boxing gloves. You think that might help? And DJ was just like, okay, if you stood on train tracks and held up a mattress, you think that's going to stop that train from murdering you?
That was an
wearing
amazing line.
wearing boxing gloves is not going to help. That's just kind of stuck with me. It was a great line. It really was.
You snapped a lot of people's necks.
Dude, so many people's like the only person that didn't die from the neck snapping uh was
Was
oh
that
the one
that
guy.
one guy who had the spinal modification, so that way he couldn't get his neck snapped because it just rotated his head. So you basically just spun his head around really fast, like 180 degrees, and he's looking at you. I was like, can I go home now?
Yeah, he literally was like, can I go home? And
Because you
Slick was like,
clearly won. He recognized that you won.
oh, there was 8 ways. He's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess so. You just totally go home. Just go home.
That was great because you teamed up with that guy later on.
Hell yeah. He's like, hey, don't snap my neck. It's like, it's okay, dude. You're on our side right now. I think, yeah, that was the character that eventually became like covered in like red chitinous armor and ended up fighting 1,000 demons in hell before coming back to the mortal plane.
Yeah, that was the very end of the Shadowrun campaign that lasted like what? That was a long campaign. It was like
It was
two
like
years,
3 years,
3 years. Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
Dude, it
So
was
that's normally
nuts.
not what you would do in Shadowrun, but uh, things kind of escalated in my game because I run everything like an anime.
Oh, everything, absolutely everything. Now shifting gears from second into third, playing a the kind of monk archetype For Shadowrun, it works out really well. There's stuff that you can do with it. For Dungeons and Dragons, obviously, there's the monk class. But there's a lot of other game systems out there, like Rifts.
Rifts, you could just do anything. Deadlands,
anything.
there's a monk equivalent.
Yeah.
I actually don't know the mechanics on it, but I know it exists. You can even do that in like World of Darkness. Like
Oh,
say
absolutely.
say you're a mage, then you could totally just I'm not super familiar with the mechanics on World like mage stuff,
I
but
think you'd have to be a Force Mage. That
Force
would
mage,
work out
that's
really
what you
well.
probably would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew that there's one you can like really get janky with uh, the crazy over the top action.
Yeah.
That
The
sounds
the
right.
the space mage is portable bag of holding. You know
Dude,
the
can you teleport as a space mage?
Oh yeah, totally.
Because I was just thinking like you punch somebody and while they're flying backwards you teleport behind them and then like kick them in the back and
Yeah,
then
no,
send them back
totally.
flying the other direction and then you
Yeah,
teleport again or just something crazy like that.
yeah, that would be a lot of fun. I can't remember if they're on opposing sides of the pentacle or not, but yeah,
Yeah, I
I
don't.
think a force space mage would work out pretty well. My space mage was a perpetual pothead that would if people ticked him off, basically take the guy, open up a portal to underneath the ice cap in the Arctic, drop them in, and then close the portal because
Ah,
he
just like a
bastard.
monk would do.
No, not at all. Yeah, that was my space mage though. But you could play I think it would be good for mage. I think there's one for changeling as well. I think it's I'm not quite as familiar with changeling. I'd have to ask Marissa
I
about
mean,
that one.
basically,
She's
the
really
the
familiar
gist of
with
all
that.
this is that any system that you come across, you can make a martial artist somehow
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
without even breaking rules, just like by either thinking outside the box or just getting creative with it. Then you can come up with some cool Bruce Lee kind of shit.
Oh yeah. Like one of the best things to really look at when you're going to go and play a monk, and this is for any game system, be it cyberpunk, futuristic. I think that you can actually take a World of Darkness and pretty much put it anywhere. Like I think we did.
I mean,
Uh,
modern, regular fantasy,
yeah,
historical fantasy. I mean, pretty much anything at some
yeah,
point.
pretty much anything. But there's a place for the monk. You know, there's not always a place for the cleric. There's not always a place for the paladin. Uh, but there's always a place for the martial artist, and it exists within our pop culture even today. Watch a lot of martial arts movies. You know, a really good example, which you wouldn't place as a character that would be a monk, would likely be Neo from the Matrix. That's a monk. It's just a kind of cyberpunk monk. So take your inspiration from wherever you want. Any martial arts movie is a really good place to look when you're wanting to create a monk. And even if it's, you're going to be playing in a high fantasy setting, a duster and a pair of sunglasses are
And
always cool, no matter what time period you live
also,
in.
you don't have to like necessarily stick to the unarmed strikes. You can one of the at least with fifth ed, one of the cool things is that you can use weapons,
Yep.
certain weapons. Like so, if you wanted to be like a monk that specializes in using a bow staff, you don't have to do unarmed attacks really. You could just like really get descriptive with like twirling it around and like smacking people and like tripping them up to represent going prone from using like open palm.
Mhm.
Because even though it's not your
Now,
palm, that's like you can still knock them prone and shit.
the monks from 3.5, uh, they were uh, they were proficient with it was just basic weapons and special weapons that are part of the monk's training. And there's a listing in the
Did older
3.5
monks?
book.
Because with fifth ed you always get the same damage dice, but in older
Yeah.
editions, did you still get the monk damage die, or did you have to use the weapon type?
You only use the weapon types damage. Your damage was specifically unarmed damage, whereas in fifth edition, that is not the case. You're using a dagger. You're still getting your D8 worth of damage instead of a D4, and that's whenever you use a monk weapon, which in 5th edition is any simple weapon and short swords. So that's a lot
That's
of
a lot of options
versatility
right
there.
there.
Also, great thing about monks, and I believe that this is in every edition, is you don't take penalties to your attacks, or you still get your proficiency bonuses with offhand attacks. You don't have an offhand.
Right.
You can hold 2 short swords, and that's those 2 attacks right there. You don't have that negativity to it. If you want to play someone that's ambidextrous and uses both hands to do multiple attacks, monk is definitely the way to go, even for 5th edition. And that's one of the things kind of sets them apart too. Is for typically whenever you're doing an offhand attack, you don't add uh, your strength score, I believe it is, or your dexterity modifier to the damage roll. I think you still get it for your pluses to hit,
Yeah, you
but
just don't get
as
it
long
for
as you're
damage
proficient in the weapon.
other time.
But monks they do.
They do.
So keep that in mind whenever you're building your next class.
And
And
speaking of building
I will
another,
always love monks.
oh yeah, I've had not as much experience with them, but yeah, they're super fun to play. And one more thing I want to talk about is um, multi-classing from Monk. What do you like?
Ooh.
What would pair
Ooh.
well? What is just stay away from it because it just doesn't jive mechanically. Is Monk a class that you want to really stick to throughout the whole process, or with like a lot of stuff in 5th ed, do you want to take like a couple levels in something else?
Well, it depends on your monastic tradition. If you are playing a way of the open hand monk, taking it to anything other than 18th level, probably just like if anything less than 18th level or 17th level, it's just kind of a letdown because that's when you get your big thing. That's what the way of the open hand monk does. That's quivering palm. It's
That's kind of
really
what I
important to build.
was. That was kind of my impression when I was looking through
Yeah.
the monks later levels. Is that you kind of want to just commit to a monk for the
Mhm.
most part, because even the other traditions like having more monk levels gets better. Like with the 4 elements, then you can basically use more key points to buff your spells that
Oh
you're
yeah.
casting, and you get some cool shit with Way of the Shadow too. But what
Yeah.
what kind of what kind of class would you pick if you were gonna multi-class? Because like when I multi-classed out of that character, I was a sorcerer. Got like we only got to level 4, so I had 2 levels of sorcerer, 2 levels of monk. But that seemed to work really well once I actually figured out how to make it work.
Yeah. I think that when you're multi-classing, and this goes with anything really, uh, have the concept for what you want prior, and then go from there and see if you can make it work mechanically. And you managed to do something that's it's not very easy to do, but I will always advocate this. If you're going to take just a couple of levels in a multi-class to kind of dabble somewhere else, fighter is always a good way to go. That that extra little healing ability that you get, even if you're not playing a way of the open hand monk, that uh, it's not action surge. I can't remember what it was called. Where you can heal yourself for a little bit of damage.
I think it's second wind.
Yeah, second wind. That's it. Second wind. It's pretty good.
See, now
Uh,
I think I disagree with you on the fighter, because even though you can get some really good stuff out of fighter, I think it would actually be a bad idea to take it with monk, because the all the stuff you get from fighter you wouldn't really be able to use as a monk, because you'd get all the armor proficiency, but you can't wear armor. You get all the weapon proficiencies, but you can't use them as monk weapons.
yeah,
You'd get like sure you'd get a cut like the second wind thing, but you can also just get that from wholeness of body if you went open palm.
yeah. Now, if you're gonna play do a multi-class, uh, I would say that fighter is good if you can get it up to like 3rd or 4th level or 5th level. At 2nd level, you get action surge, which is really good. That's complete second attack right there. Um, if you can get up to third level and you choose like say the champion, then when you choose that archetype, not only do your does your fighter abilities, like you get second wind and action surge, but you also get the ability to improve critical. And that 19 to 20 crit for a monk would be nasty. Absolutely
That is a good
disgusting.
point.
Uh,
A couple. Okay, so here are the. I think these are a couple classes that I think would jive pretty well with monk without having to do janky shit like with sorcerer.
mhm.
Um, the I think that maybe the top choice barbarian
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely.
they have the unarmored AC and all that shit. So that it won't stack or anything, but you won't have to worry about wasted like potential.
Yeah, but
Uh,
let's say you get some kind of wuji thing that ups your con, and you have a really good con because hit points are important, and you take that. Hey, congratulations! You can use whichever one's better, and you still get all the benefits for it. So
and,
that's a good way too.
and it's also easy to like role play like channeling your key energy instead of going the mental clarity route, going in the I channel my key to be fucking pissed. And
The angriest of calm people.
like I mean, you can play it as you are in control of your emotions, so that's why you can rage on like turn one, or and why you don't like continue being upset after a while because you're like,
Hmm.
I'm really mad. I can channel my anger into these powerful blows, and then when I need to, you put your hands together, you close your eyes, take a breath, you control your feelings, and then you are back to normal.
Rage from monk. That +2 and +3 to damage. Oh
And
god, it's so
then
good.
the
That
other
would be really good.
yeah, then the other class that I was thinking is because this one pretty much I don't think there's any class that this doesn't go with, but it's Warlock.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen some really good builds for monk, warlock. I've seen a couple of really good sorcerer warlock ones. There's
Yeah, I've seen
actually
Warlock
even
for like people will take
yeah.
Warlock for anything.
Oh yeah. Oh,
It's like
absolutely.
Wizard Warlock.
Yeah. Now check with your GM. But if you take a packed weapon, a warlock that has a packed weapon, uh, talk to them about letting that packed weapon be a monk weapon, as long as it fits within the kind of stereotypical thing, like it
I mean,
needs to be a short sword,
if you get a short sword pack
or
weapon,
finesse.
then you're
Yeah,
pretty much good to go.
yeah. That packed weapon combo with a monk would be kind of
Oh shit!
nuts.
I just realized Rogue would be a good one too.
Oh yeah.
It,
Well, Meepo is a rogue warlock,
right? No,
and
I'm
he
talking about
absolutely destroys it.
I'm talking about Rogue Monk because
Oh yeah.
if
Way
you
of the
get
Shadow Monk and Rogue.
not even Way of the Shadow Monk, but like just the inherent sneak attack die
Oh yeah.
that you could because you could pair that with almost any monk weapon.
Mm.
And do fists count as finesse?
Uh, I think for a monk they do, because you can choose to use either your strength or your dexterity, and that's kind of how finesse weapons work.
Hmm.
Uh, but I'm not entirely certain.
I'll have to look
Uh,
it up later.
yeah. Now there are a couple of classes that multi-classing in with monk you would be really kind of kicking yourself in the teeth with. One of those is, I hate to say this because paladins are so good outside of everything else. Paladins are one of those classes you should probably just either stick with paladin or multi-class with cleric. You really don't want to take it anywhere else, because you lose so much traction uh, for a paladin if you multi-class him with monks, and the armor for the paladin is really where they
Well,
shine.
I
That's
mean, this
where they
is the
get their
same thing
power.
with like fighters. So
Oh yeah,
I would think that fighters, paladins, clerics would all be bad choices because they get heavy armor or medium
yeah,
armor, and you will never be able to use that.
yeah.
And the
I
other thing is, if you start casting spells like healing spells or something, that's effectively taking you out of what you're supposed to be doing, because you're using your whole action just to cast like Cure Light Wounds or something like that, which could be very helpful, but you're giving up like at 4+ attacks.
Yeah. Um, it's uh, uh, it's really hard to kind of it's really hard to give it the justice that it deserves when you multi-class with a monk. I think that if you're going to multi-class, then decide that early on, and recognize that there's some things higher up in the food chain as far as monks go, uh, that you're kind of just gonna kick yourself for. A good one for monks, however, is if you take like 3 levels of ranger, you get hunter's mark, you get dueling, and then you can go Colossus Slayer or Horde Breaker, and those things kind of add in a little bit more to the way the monk works. And even if you're out of key, Hunter's Mark is still going to be useful, and you get that bonus to weapon damage when you get dueling anyway. So you also get that plus D8 if your target's under max HP, and if you don't have key or Hunter's Mark, you still get that too for Colossus Slayer. So there's a lot to go in with Monk and Ranger. Monk and Fighter at 3rd level, that increased crit range is really good. Monk and Rogue, pretty good, but anything beyond that, really you're hindering yourself.
See, I was just thinking about Monk and Bard, which I think you can get that to work, but I think you have to do janky shit like pairing it with
Yeah,
Sorcerer.
yeah, you'd really have to. It would have to be the monk. It would have to be a Way of the Open Hand monk, uh, or you probably couldn't use Way of the Shadow monk. It really wouldn't work out, so you'd have to use a 4 element one, or Way of the Open Hand,
I don't know.
and then
I think any of them would work. It's just like it comes back to like the spell casting thing, and then using like the performance stuff while you're in combat. I think you can work with that. I just think it would be challenging and not something you would want to go into if you don't have experience with a monk or a bard or any of the individual classes.
yeah. Uh, Now, another thing that this actually got brought up at one point in time. I don't know whether it was your campaign or somebody else's. I actually think it was mine. Uh, can a monk use key points for attacks while they're in wild shape? And I think that
Oh,
that's
that
on
was
a
not my
DM.
game. We didn't have any wild shape in Legends of
Yeah,
Latir at all.
I think that that was a on a uh, case by case basis. If your GM's cool with that kind of stuff, and you want to go super anime with it, and do a lot of hard hitting for it, that wouldn't be too bad for monk and druid.
Yeah, but
Uh,
just as written, because obviously rule of cool can trump anything.
oh,
But
absolutely.
just like with the rules and how they're written, it could be interesting. I think with Druid, because I that's like the one I have the least amount of experience with out of any class. Uh, I think you're again running into the spell casting wall where you're
Mhm.
using your turns to cast spells, and at that point, why not just be a dedicated spellcaster?
Yeah. Well, that's one of those things you can. I don't know whether or not this is true. Please correct me in the comments if I'm not. But you can wild shape prior to a combat, or I think you can wild shape as a bonus action. I'm not sure.
I really
I could
don't know much
actually look
about
that up.
druids.
Um, but back to the original, a College of Valor, Way of the Open Hand monk, or 4 elements monk might work fairly well.
Now,
Uh,
real quick before we
yeah.
sign off, um, if you are a different class, like let's say your main class is something other than monk, is there is there a good argument for just taking a couple levels of monk?
I would say that if you're playing any other class and taking like 1, 2, maybe even 3 levels of monk, what you get out of the gate for monk is one of the few things that's absolutely invaluable, and that is unarmored defense and your martial arts. And if you take 2, that's unarmored movement and your key
I
points.
would say if you're gonna take the monk class, like at least get the 2 levels. because
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
don't get access to key points until second level and all the other good stuff.
Yeah. But the ability for you to use your dexterity or your strength modifier and a die to do unarmed damage, even like if you're, let's say you're a fighter and you don't want to take it all the way up to 20 levels, but you want something to kind of oh shit button, uh, and you carry like, oh my god, all of my swords just got eaten by a rust monster, and now I've got to fight this thing, and it's coming at me right now. Well,
You got to punch it.
cracked knuckles, I can punch it.
Well,
So
I would say a couple levels would work really well in just pretty much uh, any spellcaster class. Like, you
oh
wouldn't
yeah,
want to take spellcaster if you're maining monk, but I think if you're maining a spellcaster, you could take a couple levels of monk, because then if you run out of spell slots, first of all, it keeps your hands free for somatic components.
oh
So
yeah,
if you need to cast a spell, you could just switch to that. But otherwise, if you like run out of spell slots, or if you just need to get up in combat for some reason, then you could just start punching things.
yeah. I think that if let's say you're gonna take 15 levels of sorcerer, but that's as high as you want to go, 5 levels in monk, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good combo because you get that extra attack, you get regular ability score improvement, you get slow fall, you get in monastic tradition, so you can actually choose to get more spells. So there's a lot of things that go with it. I think that monk is really versatile as a dip in for a quick couple cool things, uh, and I think that that's really valuable. But we'll cover the quick dip for other classes when we come to
Yeah,
those when we
let
talk.
us know if you like the individual class focus. Obviously, we're trying something new. This has a lot more mechanics,
Mhm.
into it, rather than a lot of our more philosophical or theoretical world building kind of stuff. Um, but just let us know. We'd like to hear your feedback, and we will
Oh,
see you
absolutely.
next time on Playing God.